BBC have published their annual salary report, which shows the names and salaries of stars and executives who earn £178,000 or more each and every year.
Yeah, so the BBC also reported revenue of £5.9 billion. That's up 10% on the previous year. And so the top paid presenters, guess who they are? Of course, Gary Lineker, up there in the number one spot. You've also got BBC's broadcaster Nick Robinson. You've got Fiona Bruce, Justin Webb and Greg James, all earning north of £400,000.
While the Director General, Tim Davie, is earning more than £540,000.
Well, there you go. So, yes, the list is available for you. Gary is very much at the top. Then you've got Zoe Ball, Alan Shearer, Greg James, Nick Robinson, Fiona Bruce, Stephen Nolan, Lauren Koonsberg, Vernon Kay and Justin Webb.
But it's an
with very big
interesting day
salaries.
for the BBC, of course, because as these salaries are announced, the BBC is in a bit of turmoil. Yes, the MasterChef host John Turode is being accused of having made a racist remark, something that he says he doesn't remember.
Yeah, so The Sun's reporting that the broadcaster told Mr Turode to leave the show by claiming he had mental health issues. This all comes after over 45 out of 83 allegations were substantiated and upheld against Greg Wallace.
Well, joining us now is the campaign director at Defund the BBC, Rebecca Ryan. Rebecca, is there a risk here that people jump on this guy Turode for one thing that he may or may not have said a few years ago at some social event, which we're not being told what this supposed racist remark was? I mean, is this going all a bit far?
I think it's also opaque, isn't it? And we can't really know or judge what's really happened here. And this is the problem, isn't it, with this kind of witch hunts that go on in organisations like the BBC, where we can't really judge on what has been said and where, sensitivities change over time. So we can't really know. But the main problem is that people are forced to pay for the BBC if they watch anything that's live broadcast. And therefore they have to pay for this. And, they don't have a choice one way or the other, whether they can, form an opinion on what's been said or what hasn't. And then the BBC sort of marks its own homework. And it suddenly, either people are painted as being sort of deeply racist and therefore they're cancelled, or things get swept under the carpet. It's just not a decent way for a national broadcaster to be going about things.
And what do you make of these salaries that have just been published? I mean, every year everyone has a look and they gawp at some of the big pay. Gary Lineker, of course, he's recently departed, but he was paid $1.35 million or thereabouts. Lots of other presenters earning six figures, very high six figures, some of them as well. I mean, does that stick in the craw? Is that a problem for you at your campaign, just the scale of these salaries? Or is that just, well, they'd be paid by ITV or they'd be paid by another network similar?
I think the main issue for Defund the BBC with these salaries, it mainly around, Gary Lineker's salary was always seen as being outrageous, particularly because he was always, tweeting things that were sort of deeply political. And that, really frustrated people who were forced to pay for this if they were watching, Sky Sports or whatever. So that's frustrating. Obviously, he's leaving now. And therefore, it becomes less of an issue. But at the same time, people think, if these salaries are actually sort of representative of what's the commercial marketplace, then fine. But the thing is, we can't know that whilst we're forced to pay via a licence fee. And therefore, these reports come out. And whilst the BBC is in the midst of this sort of turmoil around these various reports, particularly around the Hamas report that came out yesterday at the same time as the Greg Wallace one, so then to see these salaries come out, people are like, well, why are we paying for this? It would be fine if we had a choice whether to pay for it, or if the BBC was actually adhering to its obligations in its charter, which means that meant to deliver journalistic excellence and also be representative of all parts of the UK, and they don't do either of those things.
Well, Rebecca Ryan, thanks so much for covering what a confluence of BBC-related stories there. Thanks for joining us.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private Internet Access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GBNews discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GBnews to start protecting yourself digitally today.
That time of year again, BBC salaries have been announced, and Gary Lineker has ended his time with the Bee by topping the corporation's pay league for the 8th consecutive year. Yes, its annual salary report shows that the ex-Match of the Day host earned over £1.3 million of licence payers' money before he quit in May. Now, other big hitters include Alan Shearer on £440,000 and the Radio 1 presenter Greg James, who at £425,000. And joining now from sunny Greece is our own Greek gift, the tanned Adonis, former BBC presenter Danny Kelly. Danny, you're on holiday in Greece, but I knew you'd take time out of your day to have a pop at Gary Lineker, once again topping the league table.
Do you know what, Martin? To be fair to Gary Lineker, about 5 years ago, because Gary Lineker's always been embroiled in this dispute about him getting paid far too much money, which I think everybody agrees. But he actually said, look, to the BBC, he said, just pay me less money. That's what he actually said, just pay me less. And that encapsulates the problem. The BBC just need to pay less money. You mentioned Alan Shearer. Of all the shows to be in the spotlight, Match of the Day, Alan Shearer, Martin, has had a £60,000 pay rise. So although the BBC got rid of Gary Lineker, and they didn't renew his contract because, like I said on your show a year ago, he was doing more harm than good for the BBC. So they got rid of Gary Lineker. Alan Shearer, it's on our screens now, a £60,000 pay rise. But there are some people, Martin, that aren't household names, some managers who are on like £250,000. Now, the opposite to this argument is the fact that, well, it's a commercially driven sector and they can go and get that sort of dough elsewhere. Well, my argument is that, no, they can't. Radio 2 presenters, Martin, people like Jerry Vine, I think Jerry Vine's very talented. He's just had a massive pay rise. He's on £300,000. You wouldn't get Jerry Vine working anywhere in the commercial sector. He's too old.
Now, Danny Kelly, £1.35 million, that would buy a lot of Efes. It would buy a lot of kebabs where you are today. But here's the point, Danny. It's like, at the moment, there are huge question marks over the BBC's tenacity, its veracity. There's an Ofcom ruling on this Gaza documentary. There's the Greg Wallace scandal. Now John Trudeau has been pulled in. We've got Glastonbury. We've got Bob Villan. You know, there's a lot of smell around the corporation. And against that backdrop, with bank rolls like this, giant checks off the scale, is it time to completely review the entire funding system?
Martin, that's such a great point because it's a drop in the ocean, all of these salaries combined. But it's the public perception, Martin, that you've just hit the nail on the head there. It's the perception that, OK, so people can go and get a job elsewhere. They can manage ITV. They can come to GB News. They can earn healthy salary. But it's the public perception that the licence fee payer is paying for this. Martin, when I left the BBC, I became dispassionate about the organisation, and you and I have locked horns about the funding of the BBC over the years, but I'm starting to come to your way of thinking about the future model for the funding of the BBC. Maybe it could be part commercial. The radio stations, for example, Martin, I don't think anyone would stop listening to BBC radio stations if they were funded by commercials. I really don't. And maybe there's an argument to keep the news impartial. So that would be a compromise between your and my position. Maybe it could be lowered significantly. Don't forget there are 18,000 people that work for the BBC, Martin, and that would be a hell of a lot of people losing their jobs, because I don't think commercially they'd survive.
Danny Kelly, we heard today there were over 500 BBC employees at Glastonbury. What on earth are they doing? Why does it take that many people to put on a blooming music festival?
Martin, I tell you what, mate, one of your greatest assets is a reporter called Jack. I can't remember the lad's name. He did a fantastic piece. Yeah, he did a fantastic piece to camera. He's a one-man band, that lad. He's a young man with a camera, and he managed to do what the BBC would take 6 or 7 people to do a report, and that's what's great about GB News. And if people want to understand the difference between commercial enterprises like GB News and publicly funded, bloated organisations like the BBC, it's 500 people at Glastonbury, and it's one lad with a camera phone in the northeast doing this station proud.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And by the way, Danny Kelly, have you ever had the problem in your career of saying, please, sir, pay me less?
No, never had the problem. Even on regional radio, Martin, they pay me. I said, how much are you going to pay me? They gave me it. I said, how much? I said, listen, let me go away and think about it. Give me another 5 or 10 grand and I'll start. And they gave it me. Even on regional radio, they pay far too much, though.
Well, I mean, most people on the BBC have paid far so much, but Danny Kelly, I'm sure you're worth every penny. Thank you for joining us from your holiday there in Greece. Always a pleasure. Now get back on the pop. Danny Kelly, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Now,